So if you might grant us a few minutes, because we all had group meetings in the morning and these are troublesome times. So Lina is on the way, and I'm, as I said, I'm the entertainment program in between. But welcome to the European Parliament. Welcome taking the effort to engage in a discussion which is timely, because you might have seen what happened in the United States in terms of China. I mean, we had a certain intellectual understanding, but if you think a little bit in, let's say, scenarios, it could access to data would have been denied. We saw a dramatic example which was actually not perceived so much in public in terms of when in the first Trump administration the Ministry of Energy was supposed to delete all the climate data we collectively had been producing from their servers, and you know that had been then transferred on European servers. We don't get into the detail to which servers, and then it had been administration. So that shows us that what had been almost unthinkable in the last 20 years, to what extent the sovereignty is inflicted by the geopolitical setting, that is going to open a discussion on that. I mean, this is easy to open the discussion. It's much more difficult in terms of infrastructure, in terms of also the setting within the member states, in the relation between Commission, member states, data regulations, and so. But I think we have to, and we have seen that in the proposal a little bit more in depth. There is a reference already to that, so we are very grateful that Mrs. Razzo is today here. And although we are in the beginning of the MFF negotiations, but I think that shows a path, and it could be plausibly that the Parliament might get a little bit deeper or more in that direction. That's also an interaction between Council and us. I think it's in parts of the let's say, work in progress, simply because I think these issues are politically seen a little bit of a moving target, because it depends on what will be the situation in the United States. So I think it's not just an academic exchange, it's for the political discussion on that, and I think it will be exemplified by also to what extent, because it's a costly issue we are talking about, but it will be started by the MFF negotiation, and specifically then on the parts which are referring to the big infrastructures in Europe. Desperately to the entrance, whether Lina is going to come. We either now having decided, because today she was meant, although I had been suggesting that she was meant to chair, and I was meant to not to be here, and now we're in this funny situation that I'm here. Apologies for that, but at least you get one of the members of the STOA chair. So, having said that, I would like specifically the Deputy Director General, Signe Razzo, a proven counterpart and someone who is also intrinsically interested, I think, in issues like that, which is not necessarily always the case. Then I might introduce a little bit what is STOA. I mean, you might all know that, but it's more or less bipartisan, although it's not the correct word, but institution of the European Parliament, which is founded or fueled by members of the ITRE committee and other relevant committees. Ah, you saved my life. So, come here. Yeah.
Sorry, I was with the Lake
No, I
Institute.
I did sing and dance, and since I'm German, it was not very impressive. So,
Okay, thank you, Christian. Well, sorry about that. Sorry about the delay, but I was meeting very important with a group of young women scientists that are in a mentoring program, and this is, something very important we need. So, thank you, Christian, for being Galvez Munoz for a moment. But so thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Mrs. Razzo, and all the panelists, of course. But I guess Christian already, you know what STOA is, and but why this meeting, this panel we are having today? Because obviously accessible, reliable data, it is a backbone for our work in science in general. And the same way academic freedom is a requisite for research and innovation. The European Parliament Forum for Academic Freedom, run by STOA, is therefore another important angle of our. There is no research or innovation without data and research freedom. This is our kind of statement. And recent events have shown quite strangely how closely both issues are related, I would say, unfortunately. We know that major databases in various areas are supported by infrastructures that are governed predominantly by the US and some multinational organizations. Europe has made important investment in data infrastructure, but our question, in fact, the one that is enough research and innovation is resilient and competitive. We have already addressed data security and integrity in our workshops before. There's one, for instance, the one we have on open science, or another one we have on strategic autonomy. However, recently, with new attacks that we all know on academic freedom and scientific cooperation networks, the challenges have grown and are increasing. It is therefore absolutely timely to address here in STOA Europe's data sovereignty, global dependencies, and policy responses to safeguard its research, our research future. It is important to discuss how data it is collected and shared, as its integrity is currently under threat. We have seen in other parts of the world that some data repositories related to research linked to women or gender have been erased. That was one thing I was explaining now to this young researcher from Leibniz Institute. For instance, that has happened in Argentina. It's probably the country that has gone further on that respect, but we will possibly been seeing that in bigger and more important countries in the near future. So this data should be collected and treated according to European values, which is, we know, privacy and the GDPR rule, transparency, and the Data Governance Act, but also with respecting and guaranteeing equality and accessibility. Data is also the lifeblood of artificial intelligence, we know that, and how to approach artificial intelligence-related open source challenges and ensuring access to artificial intelligence are key future challenges for STOA to address. So I'm glad to welcome today our prominent scientist, as well as Signe Razzo, that I say hello before, Deputy Director General DG RTD, for joining this important panel. I will be from tomorrow with the rest of the DG RTD because I'm flying tomorrow to Kyoto for the SDS forum. So I will be with the commissioner and with the director of the GRC, so many other people from the GRTD. And I would like to thank Anne Quebec from Frontiers for the great efforts to coordinate a panel with what we think are the best experts who can explain us the relevance of data in various fields such as medicine, climate, social sciences. So today we lay the foundation, and I'm certain that after the discussion today, we will be better equipped to reflect on the next steps needed, especially the European strategy for data, that it is due to be presented at the end of this month. So that's why this is very timely as well. So with all this in mind, I wish you all a very good discussion, and I hope really we could really move forward on this topic. So thank you very much.
So, can everyone hear me? Sorry, sort of diving into the microphone here. Thank you very much, Professor Galvez Munoz, for the reception and the initial words around this very critical topic. I'll start by a brief round of introductions of everyone around the table before jumping into it proper. So, I am joined here today by Professor and Chair Thomas Hartung of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School for Public Health from the USA. I do say from the USA, but he does have a variety of other hats and professorships that place him on both sides of the Atlantic, and so that will make for an interesting discussion, to be sure. We're joined also by Klaus Tottermann, who is the president of the European Open Science Cloud Association. He will have words to say about the infrastructure that is underpinning all of this and the efforts that they are deploying there to make sure that open science is implemented in practice. I'm joined here who is coming from the University of Ghent. She is a professor in computational linguistics. Anastase Harantonis, who is a professor from the Institut National de Recherche en Sciences et Technologies du Numérique in France, INRIA, with an interest in artificial intelligence, climate change, environmental sustainability, a variety of topics that are being supercharged these days with artificial intelligence. Of course, Signe Razzo, Deputy Director General of the DG RTD, already introduced, and a little bit later, beginning end, Christian Ehler, who will have a few words to say. I myself am Mehmet Toral. I'm the General Counsel of a private sector actor, Frontiers. We are an open access publisher. It is a great honor to be here this and pass the plates around while more intelligent people than I can chime in and say things about this. We do have an interest in the topic of open data sovereignty, all of this, because we are mission driven. We believe that science has to be open. Open science is critical for the betterment of humanity, but also to address all of the challenges that we face today on a global level, whether they're health related, whether they're environment related. We are an open access publisher by choice. This is our mission. And we do also believe that data is ever more a critical component of that, because we are living in an age where trust in science is being undermined at every turn, where we are seeing borders close, both in real terms and intellectually. We are seeing governments try to deploy increasing amounts of control over data. And if our science is not reproducible and is not verifiable, and to be reproducible and verifiable, there has to be access to data, well, trust in science is inevitably eroded. And that is bad for everybody in very real health-related terms at the end of the day. We have seen that sharing our data openly was instrumental in addressing the recent pandemic. We are now seeing that less sharing of data in critical areas such as climate, meteorology. These areas will impact people's livelihoods. It is rather interesting that today we are talking about challenges in data in climate, when it is one of the first areas in which data was actually shared very intentionally by nations. The history of this is interesting. As early as in 1845, scientists got together in Cambridge, and that was the embryo of the International Meteorological Organization in 1873. And so now, more than a century and a half later, we are still seeing this as a critical point where data sharing is not necessarily an evidence. In the social area, that data always has been a battleground for social sciences. For governments, control over data has been a critical item of controlling the narrative and discriminating sometimes quite brutally against populations. We certainly don't want to go back to that type of day and age. Open data around of how we address inequalities throughout society. And to go to academic freedom as well, we are seeing that individual scientists are attacked for how they deal with data and the data that they do push forward. The example of Michael Mann comes to mind, famous for the hockey stick graph around the evolution of temperatures worldwide over the last century or so. He's been embroiled in legal dispute upon legal dispute around the validity of the data. So there is a lot to be said in this, on this topic. And data sovereignty itself as a concept does create an interesting series of tensions, because it is very much around data security, it is about resilience, it is about a future. But at the same time, there are questions to be asked around whether more openness around data is in tension with that, or whether data sovereignty as well. So I'm sure these are interesting questions that will be touched on. So with that, I will hand the floor over to Professor Thomas Hartung, who is also the Field Chief Editor for Frontiers in Artificial Intelligence, there, fully disclosed. In that capacity, these days, artificial intelligence touches pretty much everything and anything. He has a lot of interesting things to say about how data is dealt with overall. Over to you, Professor Hartung.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always good to come back. I was 7 years in the JRC as a unit head, and I learned about the importance of science talking to policymakers. And I still 7 years European as a professor in Constance, a resident in Italy. So I can typically give the US position in Europe and the European position in the US. That's my trademark. As you have heard, I'm Field Chief Editor of Frontiers in AI for now 7 years, where we published 1,700 articles. And this was really witnessing in real time a technological revolution which was taking place. I think everybody knows this is something which is changing how we are working and how we are dealing with things. And why now? Because there's a synergy between 3 logarithmic growth curves. The data in the world are at the moment doubling every 18 months. Yeah? Every 18 months we have twice as much data, or 90% of all data roughly are produced in the last 3 years. Our computers for the last 60 years are doubling every second year. This is known as Moore's law. 60 years, doubling every second year. But AI, since the introduction of deep learning, so this year's AI is 8 times more powerful than last year's. And this altogether gives rise to these enormous possibilities. And right now, the frontier models are actually giving us the quality of their field of expertise with access to the internet. And that's what I get pressing a button. And with only the last 12 months, the number of hallucinations these models are producing has gone down from roughly 9% to about 1% at the moment. Yeah? I do hallucinate more than these models. And I love this cartoon, which I did redraw with generative AI, because the one I got was too low in resolution. It shows us very nicely, humans are hooked to technology, but the machines are actually learning, and this is the result of it. This was a study out of Stanford, which showed something very interesting for me. It's a year old. They gave complex physicians, and the physicians were 74% correct in setting the diagnosis, and the AI was 19% correct. But was really telling, when the physicians were given the AI answers, they improved. They improved to 76% because they trusted their own judgment more than they trusted the AI. And I think this shows something, which is we humans have to explore when we can trust and how we can integrate this into our workflows to really take benefit of this. By the way, all of the fonts changed here, so a lot of gets lost in translation from Mac to Windows in this. Clive Humby in 2006 said, "Data is the new oil." And this is true. And I would continue, and AI is the new combustion engine. Yeah, it makes sense of these data. These two go hand in hand. Big sense comes from big computers and big data. And we are witnessing this revolution taking place at the moment. The problem, my fear, is that we will at some point have a type of OPEC for this data oil. And this can come from many sources. Europe needs data sovereignty because it is not simply where the data servers sit, but it is who has the right to decide how data are governed, shared, and reused. Yeah? This is of critical importance for being part of a technological revolution which produces at the moment PhD-type quality. Open science is at the moment endangered by a number of things. First of all, data are becoming a commodity. Yeah? It is suddenly valuable to own data and license them for those who want to make use of them. We see how authors at the moment are benefiting from agreements with the companies providing the large language models, so they're less willing to have their books available for free. There's a declining willingness to share. There's data protection rules which are necessary, but they also can, they can also hinder scientific progress. There's political influences, as you can see in real time at the moment, where we don't know whether tomorrow we will still have actions are critical to the livelihood of science, such as PubMed. PubMed is the only location where per year 2.2 million articles are being registered, curated, and made accessible to the world. Imagine that this suddenly would not become available anymore. We would not know how to substitute for this. And it's also open for fraudulent actors. So cybersecurity issues are definitively one of the problems we can be facing. This is an article we wrote last year taking the example of image analysis. And we are discussing here how vulnerable a diagnostic system, for example, based on pictures is. There's more and more the possibility to take a photograph with your smartphone and let the AI decide, is this possibly a melanoma or not? Yeah? Something like this. Very helpful to get people into many steps in the process. And it can also be open for AI poisoning, for malicious manipulation. These type of health systems can easily be fed with mislabeled information, and also unverified images and others can undermine the trustworthiness of these systems. Also, the scientific literature can be polluted and affected with respect to medical devices, and does not take much wrong information to really decrease the value of such systems. So we are talking about just taking this example for vulnerability to cyber attacks and tampering of the healthcare system through. There's a lot of pillars for open science, which is the only answer to keep this running and fuel this revolution. Fair data is a typical request to make our data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But we are forgetting that it's not only about the data, it is also about the metadata. How have these data been generated? And while we are getting better and better in making data available as a whole, we are not getting much better in describing what was the experiment behind this, because we don't have standardized formats for doing just so, and AI can only be as powerful as the data it has been given. Research integrity is critical for this, because if data are fueled into the system which are not true, that's a problem. But as much as AI can accelerate the production of such fraudulent type of publications, it can also be the tool to help us to identify it. Because if humans can identify something which is fraudulent, AI can do so too. Next generation metrics for research impact will be important, so that we encourage the right type of research. We need to enable platforms of open scholarly communication, especially open access publication. Imagine 3.4 million scientific articles are published every year in biomedicine. 3.4 million. But only 20% are in full open access journals, which are easily accessible to AI. Another 30% are in repositories, which are difficult to access for AI. So essentially, AI is condensating only 20% large language models. Also, to make this part of our education and the skill sets of future generations of scientists, how open science principles have to be applied. And this requires rewards and incentives. We need to recognize the contribution of scientists to these type of systems. One initiative I have proudly been part of from the initiation is the Open Science Charter, which Frontiers did initiate, which has at the moment some 2,000 signatures. I think it is important to raise the awareness of colleagues that this is a goal, a common goal. As much as producing papers, it is about openness in these processes. This is from last week, where the chief editor of Science, Magdalena Skipper, posted this article. It's an editorial in Nature, where for the first time a large language model, in this case DeepSeek, was peer-reviewed. And I think that's really a very important call. Bring assurance and validation in these processes to understand objectively how good they are, how reliable these sources are. We need good AI practices. And this is a collaboration between technology development, ethical deliberations, and policy. And there is a lot on the way, especially in Europe, which can help us that European values are part of this process. The Open Science Frameworks, the Data Governance Act, and others are very important steps on this way. I think we have to think even a step further. This is a provocative article I wrote earlier actually last month, today is the 1st of October, where I'm thinking through, out of something we wrote as a white paper for the World Economic Forum, how language models and AI are changing science. At this moment, we are discussing to which extent we can use AI for science. In the future, I believe we will do science for AI. We will, to some extent, have to write science instead of IE with AI, because it will be not only the integrating tool, which keeps our knowledge up to date and integrates and understands what is important, what is not, but it also will more and more decide what is fundable research, what is research which should be executed because it closes knowledge gaps and creates nodes for more understanding. And we better prepare for it. And with this, I would like to close. I hope I gave you some thoughts to set the scene. I believe that, not very Buddhistic, we have to see evil, hear evil, and speak out evil. And this is my QR code if you want to follow on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hartung, for that description of the combustion engine in a lot of detail. A few key takeaways from me here before I hand the floor over again. The AI poisoning item is definitely going to be top of everybody's minds. I mean, if that is what is, if the data is feeding the machine, the quality of the data that goes into it, the control over that data is obviously key. The mention of PubMed, it is the single biggest database of medical papers out there. It is in the USA. There was a substantial fear around access to it being cut earlier. There are European initiatives to reduce that reliance. We'll see the challenges around that later on as well, I'm sure. And of course, the call out right at the beginning that European data sovereignty is a necessary part of the protections that have to be put in place if any of the positive sides of the AI vision at the end of the day. So I think that's a good theme on which to hand the floor over to Deputy Director General Signorazzo for the views of the European Commission on this topic.
Well, many thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, many thanks to the European Parliament, to STOA, Mr. Ehler, for bringing us together here, or for organizing on a very important, I would say, a crucial topic. A crucial topic for today, but even more for the future. Few topics are as vital to the future of research and innovation as the way we govern, manage, that fuels discovery. Again, coming back to this, the oil that fuels the combustion engine, however you call it. Now, let me just start with a short overview of what we've been already doing at the EU level. Over the years, Europe has built an impressive landscape of facilities and services in research infrastructures, operating world-class data services and databases in many fields, from life sciences to particle physics, from social sciences archives to Earth observation, climate modeling, and many more. Europe with a solid foundation of trusted, high-quality data across disciplines, supporting researchers and public services every day, while embodying our values of transparency and collaboration. However, we do recognize the challenges that have become of more immediate importance, exacerbated by the current geopolitical situation. We are seeing that long-standing global collaboration frameworks for research are being questioned, exposing